This woman tweeted something a couple days ago. She said, a guy stopped me after Mass and asked for my number. My sister witnessed it. I am mortified. And a lot of people were interpreting that as basically like, well, that's so rude. Why would you say that? Like, this guy came up and spoke to you and now you're making fun of him online. It goes viral. Like, that's got to suck for him. That's true. That's not how, like, I kind of viewed it. I mean, I don't believe, I'm not actually a misogynist. I do play one on TV, but I don't actually think that, like, women need to, like, a guy comes up to them and is like, hello, milady, like, can I have your number? Like, I don't think she needs to necessarily be nice about that, But anyway, my problem with this was more as it kind of alludes to the general, just like, oh, just go meet a girl at church, bro, like that kind of stuff, which, we'll get into. But I replied to this tweet and I said, there's a lot of well-intentioned meet a girl at church advice that gets thrown around here. The young patriot must give himself permission to consider why a mid to late 20s woman would be showing up to church without a man in the first place. Be smart. And some people didn't like this so much. Some people understood that it was a truth nuke. So we will elaborate on this. That is true. The idea behind, oh, just meet a girl at church, what you mean by that is you are trying to filter out, undesirable traits, behaviors, what have you, from like the general population. You can go about your day and meet girls. There'll be plenty of very nice girls out there. But by going to church to meet a girl, you're trying to, save yourself a little time, filter out a lot of the stuff that is maybe not so good. And so what I am simply presenting is, given that, this woman who was tweeting this was like, I think 26, 27. I'm just saying, if you're showing up to church 26, 27, you're still not married. I'm not saying that's like the worst thing ever. I don't know what the story is here. I'm just saying that is a data point that needs to be considered, right? Because by that age, if you're still not married, it's not like you haven't had any boyfriends. It's not like, so like something must be going on here. Which is maybe the reason for that, especially you're going to church at this point, 25, 26, 27, you're still single. There's something that happened there, which is why you're not currently married if you really are just like some traditional girl who we're going to try to market to our young traditional patriots. And so I don't like that as like a prescription. I don't think that we can say there's enough of a demonstrated agreement on what it means to be a Christian for us to like recommend just like that strategy in good conscience. This whole just go find a wife at church. Like, of course it works. Of course it works quite well for a lot of people. A lot of people I know personally, especially, depending on which church you go to, a mega church might be a little bit different than something more traditional. Obviously, I'm just saying when people say that, like influencers say that, podcasters say that, that's an applause line. They are saying that because it feels good to counter modern degenerate dating app culture by saying, you know what you need to do? You need to be trad and you need to go to church. That's where you're going to find a good woman, is at church. I don't know how much more reliable that is. I don't know what going to church actually tells me as a sort of like, demonstration of behavior, intent. We'll talk about it. The point is, in more conservative circles, however, the discussions about where you would typically go find a girl are going to be based on, more, again, most important decision of your life kind of intentions. So instead of just looking to go on some swipe-based dating app and debase yourself, people are interested in figuring out how to find their wife, their trad wife, right? And a lot of conservatives seem to believe that the best way to do this is to meet a girl at church. Is that really the case? Now, to be clear, I totally understand why people would view church as the best of all options. It seems to be the safest, like, yep, there you go. After all, I mean, people who regularly go to church, presuming it's not one of these like mainline Protestant churches with the trans lesbian priests, the smoke machines. Actually, dude, honestly, even the smoke machine churches are pretty conservative in disposition, even if I don't necessarily agree with that style of worship. There's still like a pretty high quality person that attends those. So I won't even counter signal that in terms of like finding nice women. I'm talking about maybe more the trans lesbian priest type churches or whatever. So if you're like a more traditionally oriented young man, you're looking for your trad wife. Yeah. Why wouldn't you find her at a church? It seems to be where she would be. Well, we did see that tweet again earlier where this woman was asking, I guess she was approached by this guy, and she was so horrified by the experience that she posted about it on Twitter. She said, a guy stopped me after Mass, and my sister saw it happen, and I was just completely mortified that it happened. This girl, I guess, is a traditional Catholic. It had 6 million views or something and like 1,000 likes or something. I don't know. Basically, that means that the tweet was not well received. And all of the replies, which I guess she locked at some point, are further evidence that people were not exactly in love with this kind of tweet, and patriots were righteously shutting out in the replies. And then she claimed that she just felt awkward because her sister was there, and, it was very kind of him, and, she admires his bravery and all that other stuff. So, in other words, there was nothing wrong with the guy. It was maybe more just that the interaction itself was awkward, and she had to, of course, tweet about it, not because she would share awkward information, but because she wanted everyone to know that she's getting approached at mass. Let's call a spade a spade. That's what this was. But it was also an attempt to exonerate herself with this sort of follow-up detail, because in earlier tweets she was saying, well, it's not the guy I wanted it to be, In other words, she's totally fine with being hit on at church, just not by that guy. So, again, I'm not committed enough to my misogyny project to think that every woman is required to give out her number to every guy who just goes up and talks to her. Like, that's obviously absurd. But it is funny that, she claims that she actually did give out the number and that she's anxious about the prospect of the guy texting her. So it's like, you can't win. There's always just... And then she even said that, he's not her type. So, again, it's a very confusing world out there, I guess. And I feel bad for the guy, dude. Imagine, you read all the posts, you listen to all the podcasts, just go find a nice girl at church and just go up to her and talk to her. And he does it, and it works. I mean, she gives the number, and he's feeling good about it. When do I text her? Do I wait 3 days? That's outdated. That's like millennial Gen Xer phone rhetoric, right? We all have our phone. He's like overthinking all of this. And then in the midst of that, one of his friends is like, hey, dude, didn't you say that girl's name was Anna? And it's the post. That nice girl who gave her number out is complaining about how he's not her type. It was awkward. Her sister was there. Black pilled yet again. Yet again, it's over, right? I don't know. I don't know if that's how it went down from his perspective, but maybe it's not too far off. I mean, the tweet, again, has like millions and millions of views. At least one of those was probably him. So, hey, we salute you, big guy. It's okay. But to be fair, this is only one instance, but I think it does kind of reveal maybe why finding a wife at church is not exactly a completely bulletproof plan. A lot of it, again, has to do with the kind of church you go to, and of course, the way you go about it. Walking up to a girl you've never talked to and asking her for her number can be difficult in any context. Again, this is not the 1990s. Dynamics are a little bit different now. Churches provide social events outside of mass, outside of service, events like young adult coffee hours, famously ice cream socials, as we learned in Texas. Anyway, there are other angles to consider. So far, we've only been focused on the practical dynamics, right? Like how to actually execute it. We've been operating under the assumption that women who are, at church are going to be conservative. So the question is, I don't know if that's even true. Again, I don't know if we have enough consensus nowadays in the Big 2-6 to know like what that even tells us about her, to where it's like, okay, we have selected for a better class of woman than general population. Of course, there are plenty of conservative girls who go to church. You would be an idiot to say that's not the case. Yet that doesn't mean that every girl, or even most girls who go to church, are conservative in any meaningful sense. I would just say, I think your best bet is meeting a girl with good values who in most cases is going to be religious, whether that's, you're in school. If you're in college, that's like perfect. You have friends. If you have female friends, this is like extremely easy because you're already like socializing in mixed company. You can get a girlfriend like very easily in that kind of situation. And if you like literally don't know a single woman, you have like 0 women in your extended circles, then I would advise maybe like working on that instead before you start, just trying to cold start your Riz and harassing a woman outside of church or something, and asking her if she wants to eat ice cream and be social, that kind of stuff. I think that there are good ways of doing this without necessarily having to select for a church kind of environment. I think you can meet a nice girl. That's a white pill, by the way. As bad as a lot of things are, I think the white pill is that most women are still like basically sweet. They do still like basically retain a lot of what you would regard to be a more feminine disposition, and you can easily like bring those girls to church with you. So it's not like, it's a complete disaster out there. But if you're intent on finding your future trad wife in public somewhere, I would actually recommend trying to do that at the gym at night on a weekend. I do not mean like like Saturday night, wait outside by your car as it closes at 11, 10:58, you're there in the parking lot following her to her car. Hey, do you want to eat ice cream and be social? No, that's not what I'm saying. You got to be careful also here, because a lot of women, they're at the gym to work out. They're going to get defensive. You don't want to end up in a TikTok, right? You don't want to like end up in that kind of environment. A lot of women who go to the gym are completely insufferable. That's not my point. I am saying that there is something to be said about like, if you're at the gym on a Saturday night, okay, I know you're there. I know where you're not. I know that there are certainly worse places you could be. And I also know that you are actually like actively working on your health. You're actively working on your appearance, which I think is actually something that's important for women to be doing. You know, they're valuing that. Like they're doing something which is self-constructive, not self-destructive. Like if they're going out drinking, partying, they're at Le Club, doing whatever. And again, this is not to say that every woman at the gym is wife material. Far from it. But the women there are on, you know, they're there on the weekends. They're there at night. They're probably single. Why would their boyfriend not be hanging out with them? I don't know. They're probably not in the habit of like, you know, getting too wild in their free time, which is actually something that's important. I think that is something that good. It tells you something, right? You know, it's one thing to roll out of bed and go to church where you can hear about how God loves you just the way you are, and you don't have to change any of your behavior, which is quite a lot of churches these days. And even insofar as it's a more traditional church, very rarely do you hear them specifically addressing the women in attendance with constructive criticism on how they ought to behave, whether that's in their personal lives, in relation to their husbands, what have you. If you're at the gym, that's like difficult. That requires a little bit more work, I think, than just like sitting there and being told how great you are and how perfect you are just for like, you know, the way you are, just as God made you. It requires like discipline, physical effort. You tend to value your appearance. You recognize that is something that is very like important to you as a woman. That's good. Like those are all good signs. I would even, dude, that might even tell you more than just simply like picking a random girl you saw at church and being like, oh wow, she's like trad. She's like great. So I don't know. Maybe we're missing something though. Maybe it's not just men who have it hard these days. Maybe women have it hard too. Again, I'm not a misogynist. I just play one on TV. You know, you open up Twitter and you dive into the dating discourse, which I try very hard to avoid. You're bound to encounter that claim, right? That there's actually a shortage of good men, not just women. It's actually good men who are a hot commodity these days because we're in short supply, I guess. There's nothing wrong with modern women. It's actually just a problem with men. You know, there are tons of perfectly attractive, charming, totally not fat, eligible bachelorettes just roaming about, waiting to be made into trad wives. But it's the men who are not stepping up to the plate and simply marrying them.